And welcome in everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It's Thursday, May the 6th. It's June the 6th, excuse me, I'm still stuck in May. We've seen Arkansas now when we talk John Calipari and his roster. He's been speaking on it, 8 to 9 guys deep in the terms of this, I guess his top grouping of players, his top 2 rotational guys he's going to carve out the NIL money for. And then he's kind of talked about backfilling that afterward with 2 or 3 more players, and he kind of described what that looked like. He talked about them in terms of walk-ons, uh, you know, scholarship money, the way that he qualified that and described it as Pell Grant money, money raised from, I guess, working camps, different things. So we need to see just what that means. Do we believe that he's done with top shelf type of players, or plan B or C even type of players to add more to the roster, where he's at 9 now with the recent addition of Trevor Brazil? So we're going to get in a little bit about what played out in this last move with Brazil. Obviously, Coleman Hawkins was a player that Razorback fans had kept an eye on. I'm going to give a little bit more detail on what played out there, specific to Arkansas. So I have some intel on that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some schedule tidbits. I think some things are very interesting, what we've learned so far about the schedule. Going back to last week, we'll talk a little bit about the staff. I gave you a nugget on the last time we came on a couple of days ago. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the staff. And then we'll start to think about maybe what kind of players, where would Calipari and what would be the time frame to kind of look around to bring in more players to backfill this roster. Because I've gone through, the top 400. I went and looked at the top 400 portal players, and there's a good number still, not a lot, but there are some options out there. I probably saw 20 to 25 players that still don't have a school or a destination. But we'll see how that would, what could be a reality, or what could be realities or possibilities, even out of the portal at this point, if you're truly shutting down the top 2 rotation, which makes sense, 8 or 9 guys. But the NIL money part of it is what I then wonder, how do you get other guys to come on sort of a glorified walk-on situation where you're telling them what Calipari said eventually would be a situation where you're trying to earn your NIL money and earn a piece of that pie. That requires patience and time spent in a program, but at the same time, Calipari is a top national brand. He's the best recruiter, and so he can probably sell just about anybody and any level of player on a reason why he should come be a part of his program, including his vision for what he's talking about. Again, 2 or 3 more guys maybe being added to the top 9, but having a different outlook on what that means. So now you've got to sell prospects on that. All right, we're 3 minutes in. Once again, thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Good morning. If you haven't done it already, please hit subscribe, like, share. But let's get into the Coleman Hawkins situation. We're going to try to move past it quickly. I think most people already have. You realize the top 2 guys at that stretch 4, sort of versatile 4, it was a position of need. It was the greatest position of need, in my opinion, to get to 9. But once it was down to Coleman Hawkins and Trevor Brazil, I started to realize, once both of those guys withdrew from the draft last week, that Coleman Hawkins' price tag, we saw it reported immediately $2 million. My source, who's directly involved with Coleman Hawkins, told me that the range was a $1.5 to $2 million. Okay, and so what this same source, we circled back after the Brazil commitment, and the same source is telling me, look, Arkansas did reach out here recently. It was Chin Coleman, associate head coach. And Arkansas's offer on NIL to Coleman Hawkins was slightly more than half of the low end of that range that I just told you. So that range was 1.5 million to 2 million. 2 million being the high end of that range, 1.5 million being the low end of that range. And I'm told Arkansas's offer was just slightly more than the bottom end of that price range, of that asking price, of that price tag, whatever you want to call it. All right. I said this 2 days ago. I did not see a reason. There's not enough disparity or gap between what a Coleman Hawkins brings to the table and what Trevor Brazil brings to the table to overpay for a player. A player's value will be determined by school needs and what a school's willing to spend. Well, there's already been sort of a bar set by Great Osobor, reportedly getting 2 million, a front line guy. So you could say, well, arguably that could be a reasonable asking price. It's only reasonable if the school's willing to pay for it. And so again, those are decisions that are made. You're looking at what you need, what your needs are. Quality front court players come at a premium. You're glad to have guys get out of the NBA draft process and come back to school if you have those needs. Quality players. Trevor Brazile was one of them. Let's not forget, Trevor Brazile was also in the NBA draft combine. His measurements, his measurables, and athleticism off the charts in the testing, among the best there. And then the feedback was need to go back to school. And so this is a quality pickup for Arkansas. We already talked about all that. We went through it. But I bring that back up to say Coleman Hawkins, who would have been a great addition as well for your front line. There was a price tag there, and Arkansas has done this before in this process just a few weeks ago on the heels of getting Jonas Adu on campus first, getting him committed. Brandon Garrison was right after him visiting, and the NIL valuation wasn't where the player had it. You saw a team, Kentucky, jump up in NIL, must have to get his commitment because he hadn't even visited there. It wasn't a place where he'd even had a visit scheduled. Arkansas and John Calipari have set their NIL valuations on players going into these recruiting situations. And so I think it's very interesting to get that feedback, because it doesn't surprise me at all that that's where Arkansas was with it. It seemed reasonable to me that there would be a cap well below what the price tag was going into this for him. And look, we've seen already that he's going to take a visit to Louisville. Louisville's been one of the teams mentioned with him. My source is telling me that's one of several visits that are planned. Now, that could change, I guess, if you go on a visit, you like what you see, and the money's there, and they say, look, don't take other visits. We'll pay you this. You figure out where are they going to be, and how does that work out? But the plan going into it is this is not a one and done visit. The plan going into multiple visits, I'm told, and some of the schools I was told might be in play for visits. Among them were Kansas State, SMU, and potentially LSU. Those were just three. There may be more, but again, those things can change. That stuff is very fluid based on, hey, if someone's saying don't take more visits, we'll pay you this, come on, and you like your visit, whatever, that could change. But going into it, that's the initial thought for him. And again, we don't want to spend time on a guy that's not part of not in the fold for Arkansas. But look, just 48 hours ago, we were talking about Coleman Hawkins at this time. We were talking about who would it be next, and that was the guy that everybody thought should be targeted one. Well, I think it was a 1-1A situation again, and Arkansas's got to make Calipari and the Razorbacks basketball program has to make those calculations based on what they think makes sense. I said several times going back a week or two that I didn't see a huge gap between Hawkins and Brazile. They were really good players that were still available too, that coming out of that NBA draft combine and then withdrawing from the draft process. Arthur Kaluma, 6'7" forward out of Kansas State. Jameer Watkins, 6'7", more of a wing in my opinion. Both of them could slot 3-4 out of Florida State. So Kansas State, Florida State. But I didn't think the positional need was as great as a four with length, some face-up skills, some competent three-point shooting, efficient three-point shooting. We looked at both Hawkins and Brazile over what they've done. But then that could also help you at the five as needed and be rim protectors. A lot of Arkansas needed more size, length, and potentially beef on that front line than they did 3-4 tweeners. Because then you might get into situations where that 3-4 tweener really can't help you when you need to be big. So, all right. So I've said all that, went through all that. But I wanted to give a little bit more insight in what happened with Coleman Hawkins. For fans that were wondering, Arkansas did make a play there, or an initial salvo, and that didn't go very far. But I think it was, again, Arkansas, you stand your ground. You say, okay, this is where we are. We've got two great options here, and let's see where this goes. All right, so Trevor Brazile It remains a Razorback. We talked about some of the value and not only the retention in terms of program retention. You've got a brand new staff. You've got players that are having continuity coming over from Kentucky with Calipari. So even though technically they were portal guys, it's not brand new to them. So he's got some program continuity in terms of what he's been doing. But an Arkansas Razorback for a third consecutive season now in Trevor Brazile. I told you one of the coaching nuggets when we talked about the Brazile commitment 2 days ago was that I'm told Ronnie Brewer Jr. will be retained. Don't know a title yet. Don't know exactly what role, but I'm told that he's going to be retained. So we'll see. We'll see if, hopefully there'll be some more that's coming from the university that go public where we can start talking titles. What we know so far is John Calipari is the head coach. You have two associate head coaches in Kenny Payne and Chin Coleman. You've got a named assistant coach already in Chuck Martin, Brad Calipari, John Calipari's son, who has been named as an assistant coach with a dual role, I think, as a player development piece there. I've seen Bruiser Flint on the road for recruiting for Arkansas, wearing the Arkansas gear. He's obviously part of the staff. We don't have an official release yet to know exactly what his title is. We're told former Kentucky star guard who played for Calipari, Tyler Eulis, will have some role on this staff, but nothing coming from the university yet. Some other names have been thrown around in terms of, as you look deeper into the staff, video coordinators, things like that. There were a couple of Kevins. So there's some stuff that hasn't been formally released yet by the university. I'll give you another nugget here. Sources told me that Joe Johnson, the Hogs icon, and to me, going to be a future Naismith Hall of Famer, is still in play as a potential for some kind of a role. That is, what I was told recently was that's still not been ironed out or determined that it's going to happen. That's not really different news than we've been talking about over time when his name emerged. But at the same time, it would be different if I knew there was some finality that either he is going to be on the staff or isn't. And the big on that is the isn't. It's not gotten to a point where it's been determined, no, that won't happen from the latest source information I've gotten. Now, that's been a few days ago, not that long ago. So when I come on here today, something may have been determined in the meantime, but just as of just a few days ago, Joe Johnson was still in play for some kind of a role. So we'll see if that pans out or not. Some of the stuff that I really wanted to go through today, I want to get through the kind of the Hawkins explanation. We talked some about the roster and how much I think there's a lot of positional versatility now. I really do. I look at guys like DJ Wagner, Boogie Fland. I think they can play the 1 and 2. I look at Nelly Davis. I think there will be times where he is a primary ball handler. He's your mainstay at the 2, but also could play a wing in a smaller lineup. I look at guys like Carter Knox, who I think is going to be has the chops to be a 2-3 combo. Can play your shooting guard, be matched up with another wing, play alongside with, or play the 3 spot. I initially look at a Billy Richmond as a 3. We'll see if we'll see how many combinations he's out there with 2 or more guards, how much small ball Arkansas plays. And then I look at Adu Thero as a 3-4 combo. So certainly can defend smaller players, guards, wings. I think, he's a guy that's a work in progress shooting the 3 ball. And he'll also help bolster Arkansas's front line and give you some minutes and roles at the 4. A lot of flexibility, a lot of positional versatility, in my opinion, when I went through those 5 names. And then, 6 names. And then when we move forward, we got 3 more now on the front line. Trevor Brazile, to me, again, a 4-5 combo. So even he can be multi-positional. I wouldn't even be shocked if we would see a lineup with Brazile at the 3, and you have another combination of Big Z and Jonas Adu, just to see what it looks like, just to run that on the court and see what it looks like. Remember, Calipari and Payne have been at this before, previously, putting guys 16 or taller, 3 of them in a starting lineup together. At Kentucky, and I can give you specifics on that. Trey Lyles, Carl Anthony Towns, Willie Cauley-Stein. So that's been done before. So there are a lot of options and stuff you can even tinker with, obviously, in your exhibition season. And then when you move into some of your non-conference play, I'm going to get into a little bit of scheduling stuff. We've talked a little bit about the coaching staff. We've talked about some of this roster fluidity and flexibility. And to me, the 7 and 8 pieces in DJ Wagner, excuse me, 8 and 9 pieces in DJ Wagner, and then Trevor Brazil really solidified both your backcourt and your front court. I think when I look at it, and I talked about this 2 days ago, and I have since seen John Rothstein. He's moved Arkansas up after this latest commitment to ninth in his way too early top 25, and talking about along with Alabama, maybe or next to Alabama, that next team in the SEC when you look at the quality 1 through 9 on this roster. Kind of stuff I touched on a few days ago. I said now I see Arkansas inching closer from maybe a top 15 ranking preseason, closer to 10 or top 10. Talked about Arkansas being in that top 3 conversation in the SEC now. So I stand by that, and we'll see more of these national guys. And we know the preseason stuff, the way too early, things will change even when you get to preseason rankings going right into the season. And then those things get blown out of the water over time. We know Arkansas did last year, nowhere near a top 15, 16 rated team as it was ranked coming in. But Arkansas wasn't the only team that didn't live up. But the point is, just looking at the roster makeup, we don't know everything about the schedule yet. We know what the matchups are in the SEC. We've gotten some nuggets on the scheduling. I want to talk a little bit about that because, Calipari last week was talking about some locations that Arkansas was going to play in. Madison Square Garden. Well, we found out that Arkansas is going to play Michigan in Madison Square Garden. We've also learned the date now. Two different national reporters kind of broke some of this stuff. December 10th. Well, the Jimmy V Classic is typically, when it first started out nearly 30 years ago, it was played in late December, in the beyond December 20th. And then for years now, it's been played early. Really, when you start looking at the dates, early December. There's 4 teams, 2 games. So it's not a tournament format. It's not a multiple game format for each team. Each team's playing a single opponent. Arkansas gets Michigan. It'll be the 8th time in program history that Arkansas has faced Michigan. It's an interesting series. It's a Big Ten opponent, first of all. Both schools have new coaches. Dusty May leaving Florida Atlantic, getting a promotion into the Big Ten in Michigan. And that's a proud basketball program historically. And then, of course, John Calipari's not a new coach and not new to these big game scenarios, certainly. At a Power 5, if you want to call it that, or a high major school, but he's at Arkansas now. 2 new coaches. You've got the Nellie Davis transfer from Florida Atlantic that helped Dusty May get where he is today with a Final Four 2 years ago and a team that was ranked most of last year and got into the NCAA tournament again. So you've got that storyline. There'll be other storylines that emerge. But just looking at it historically, Arkansas's 3-4 all time against the Wolverines. The biggest game ever played between these two teams was in the NCAA Tournament Elite 8 back in 93, 94. I was at that game. I attended that game in Reunion Arena in Dallas. Arkansas had just beaten Tulsa for the 2nd time in the same season in the Sweet 16, a really good Tulsa team. Blew them out after a closer matchup in the regular season. And then got Michigan in the Fab Four. What was left of the Fab Five minus Chris Webber, just an outstanding team, and a top 10 rated team. Arkansas obviously was a 1 seed in its bracket, but it was a great game. It was a great game, and Arkansas pulled out in the end. We know what happened after that. Arkansas advances to the Final Four, knocks off Arizona, then Duke in the title game. The school's only national championship in basketball. So it was the best season ever at Arkansas. A lot of people talk about what you did in the Final Four, but that Elite 8 matchup, that Michigan team was as good as any team, in my opinion, that Arkansas saw in the Final Four. So you basically, no NCAA tournament march is necessarily easy. Some are easier than others, but that one in particular, that Michigan team's really good. All right, so the history is there. These teams have played each other in Madison Square Garden. This won't be the first time. The last time was in the 96-97 season in March, the postseason play. Back in those days under Nolan, it was one of the rare times that Arkansas did not make the NCAA tournament. It didn't happen very often, but that was one season. Arkansas made the NIT. So after 3 home wins, if I remember correctly, Arkansas knocked off Northern Arizona, Pittsburgh, and then UNLV. I think UNLV had a 6'10" guy. What was his name? Keon Clark. Crazy length, real athletic. I believe that's right. And then Arkansas advances to Madison Square Garden to the NIT semifinals, the Final Four, postseason NIT. and loses to Michigan in the semifinals. In the third place game, Arkansas would lose to UConn, but that was the previous time that Arkansas and Michigan met up in Madison Square Garden. So Arkansas is trying to do two things in this regular season matchup on December 10th in the Jimmy V Classic. Arkansas is trying to even the record up all time against Michigan to 4-4, but also trying to settle the score at Madison Square Garden, even that record up head to head at 1-1. So those are just little scheduling nuggets for you. So again, I looked back at the history of the Jimmy V Classic. I believe Calipari coached at least one, if not two, Memphis teams in that event. I did not see Kentucky, unless I just skipped over it. I did not see any of his Kentucky teams that competed there, although he's played in that venue before. And I mentioned it coaching Memphis. He's coached teams there, is what I mean. Some of his teams have played there. So, and Arkansas obviously has been there before. So, I think that's one of those premier marquee type of matchups. But here, what's I think is really interesting. Speaking of the state of Michigan, is now Arkansas. Calipari, it came out reporting by Rocco Miller that Arkansas is going to host Oakland in a non-conference game next season. Well, that's big time, and it shows to me, it really proves to me how Calipari understands how to draw attraction to Arkansas having a home game in non-conference play against a mid-major, because this is not just one of those yawn situations. There's storylines here. We know this. Oakland upsetting Kentucky in the first round of the last season NCAA tournament was one of the biggest talking points, one of the biggest storylines of that tournament. Obviously, once you get to a Final Four, you hang a banner for a national champion. You still look back at what were the big storylines in a tournament. Who were the Cinderellas? Who made runs? Who got upset? Well, that one was talked about quite a bit. So now Calipari is going to get Oakland and get that program into Fayetteville for a game. So I think you build in a storyline even in your non-conference play, and it's not one of those technically marquee matchups, but I think it's interesting. And kudos to Calipari for inviting that. Arkansas, by the way, as a program, is 2-0 all time against Oakland. And I think those games went back to the first two seasons under Mike Anderson. I may be wrong about that. No, one of those, actually, I take that back. One of those games was played, I think, during the Stan Heath era, and the other one might have been Mike Anderson, or it might have been the end of Pelfrey. Mike Anderson did coach twice against Michigan in his first two seasons, so that's where I got that crossed up. All right, so there is a history with Arkansas versus Oakland. Again, the Hogs are 2-0 all time. We'll look to get to 3-0. I think those are interesting, two little interesting scheduling nuggets. And then the other thing, we're going back to what Calipari said during the SEC spring meetings, going back to the schedule. He talked about playing in Madison Square Garden. We went through that because we know the matchup now. Talked about a game in Dallas. So I think 2 or 3 of these HogvilleNET YouTube lives ago, I brought that up and I started to speculate, well, Dallas, that's interesting. Could that be a road game? If it was a road game, the only team I could think of for Dallas area that Arkansas would play would be SMU. And then I talked about the SEC ACC Challenge as a separate measure, a separate game from this Dallas matchup. Well, now I'm wondering, since SMU is going to be in the SEC, and I kind of forgot about, or didn't lock into that the last time I talked on it, I've thought about it. I'm like, well, when he says Dallas, does he already know, since it's not public yet, does he already know what the ACC SEC challenge matchup is? We know that Arkansas hosted the first game last year, the first time, the inaugural season, hosted Duke. Arkansas is due for a road game. Does that reference a road game against SMU? Would SMU be Arkansas's opponent? Who would be disappointed with that? Would that be a gift to SMU joining the ACC, getting a home matchup against Calipari and Arkansas? I don't know. We don't know. It could be that the ACC SEC matchup is going to be wholly separate, a different matchup, a different scenario, and Dallas has nothing to do with it. Dallas would be a great place to have a neutral site game, obviously, against any regional teams over there. It helps Arkansas's recruiting, regional teams that are not in the SEC. We know Texas and OU are now in the SEC, so we know it wouldn't be one of those two. Could it be, a TCU? Could it be, that's really close to TCU's campus. Could it be a Baylor? Could it be a Houston? Some team from the Big 12, I guess they still call it the Big 12, makes sense to me, but who knows who it could be. It may, um, it'd be really cool. It'd be really interesting if Arkansas would match up with one of the Kansas schools at a neutral site like Dallas. I don't know, if something like that could be in play. So there's all kinds of possibilities for that. We know there'll be another game in North Little Rock. There is every year. Let's see if there's any kind of intriguing matchup that emerges from that. Really, there's been some good high major programs Arkansas's brought in there, spanning the last several years and coaches. Once upon a time, Arkansas played Illinois, played Oklahoma State, played some bigger, high major caliber teams there. So we can keep an eye on that. There's been talk about Arkansas, Memphis. That talk was coming from Penny Hardaway. Well, in the spring SEC spring meetings, Calipari was alluding to they're working on a home and home series. I still call it home and away because we're, from the perspective of the team that you're talking about, that you care about, you don't care about the opponent, care about the team you follow. And so if it's Arkansas, home and away, you're scheduling a 2-game deal. One you'll host, one you'll go away and play. So that's how I frame it. But who could that be? What possibilities are there? Maybe we learn something on that soon. And then, of course, you've got 13 non-conference games. So you're going to have more matchups to talk about and learn about. So far, we're trying to cobble together what some of this stuff might look like. But I think it's very interesting. Again, when I look at the SEC slate of the matchups, we don't know the playing dates or times yet. We don't know TV designations, but we do know the matchups and the home and away stuff, and we know the round robin, I guess, days with LSU and Missouri like it has been. A&M has fallen off of it. Texas is the first. You no longer, and you're no longer doing 5 round robins home and away. You're down to 3, but even the 3 aren't permanent. It sounds like the permanence is LSU and Missouri, and then Texas will be the first home and away round robin in this upcoming season with a 16-team league. Arkansas plays at Rupp Arena. I've said this. I'm on the record with it since we're in schedule. I'll repeat it. I think Arkansas and Kentucky should be playing home and away every year. They did it the previous 2 seasons. Even more reason now with Calipari leaving and coming to Arkansas for that to be a twin bill every single year. But that's not how it looks right now, and we'll see if that ever changes. Only 3 times since Arkansas joined the SEC, starting with the 91-92 season, has Arkansas and Kentucky played a home and away in the same season. That's a shame, in my opinion, and missed opportunities. But that it is what it is. Arkansas will get Alabama at home and not play in Tuscaloosa for the first time in a while. And Tennessee, you're back on the road. I mean, you've got some great matchups. Obviously, the league was outstanding last year. I expect it to be just as good, if not better. It was really good last year from top midway point and even maybe a little further than your top, 7 teams. I think, 8 or 9 deep. It was a really good basketball league. Alabama finally gets to a Final Four. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Tide, but the Tide are loaded. Not only will be preseason number 1 in the SEC, in my opinion, but there are going to be preseason number 1s nationally, probably for some. Some of these preseason polls will probably have Bama 1. You won't see Alabama outside the top 3 in preseason national rankings. I can promise you that. I believe that. But I think Arkansas, I do. I like going back to, we talked a little bit about the schedule. We talk about the makeup of the roster. There's still more work to be done. Where could Calipari turn next? Getting some comments in. I think we're getting some salty Kentucky comments in here from Kentucky fans, salty on Arkansas. That's okay. Thanks for joining us. So, talking about Arkansas again, uh, we talked schedule a little bit, talking about now going back to the roster that justifies, in my opinion, Arkansas being maybe a top 10-ish, close to that top 10 preseason rankings, just based on what I see now, how I think that means top 3-ish going into the SEC preseason. Obviously, what you do on the court's going to matter. And these are fair talking points, though, because that's what fans do. That's what we do in the media is we start looking and breaking down these rosters and say, okay, this team might have a chance, looking at it on paper. So we know how things can blow up and not work out, right? Arkansas went through that a heavy dose of it the previous 3 seasons prior to last year. I'd say Arkansas did great. But every team hits its low points, has its lulls, and has those stretches of games where you're going, I'm not sure where this is headed. This doesn't look very good. So those things happen too. But it's always fun to talk about it from the front part of it. And we're now really going to jump in even more speculation to talk about how you've backfilled this roster. By the way, 30 minutes in, thank you for joining us here on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. If you haven't done it already, please hit subscribe, like, share. But jumping into it, roster-wise, how do you go in the portal? I'll pick a player ranked in the 300s that's still available in the portal. Supreme Cook, a 6'9" forward out of Georgetown. Double-figure score, 8 rebounds per game. That guy is he's still out there. I don't know what all his circumstances are. I picked one name, but he's down the list in terms of portal rankings, but I'm assuming most guys that are still out there are looking for some kind of a role beyond outside of top 2 rotation, and they're probably expecting some NIL money. I look at KK Robinson, who's been in the portal, still hasn't announced a decision. He's ranked 177th in 247 Sports portal rankings, I believe. My understanding is Little Rock is going to up his NIL package, so he was already getting one. That's going to be up, and he's likely to return. We'll see what's up with an announcement on that. But the point is that whoever is out there, most of the portal guys, I think it's going to be really hard to pull someone out of there and explain to them, hey, you're going to be on Pell Grant and camp money, and there'll be a process for you to get to portal money, to NIL money. Most of I think everybody's going to get something out of a collective. They'll get something. But when we're talking NIL, we're talking about beyond just the, some of the basic stuff that some of the NIL might provide, and more of that bonus check money is what so you can cut NIL up and carve it up that way and then talk about it that way. How hard is it going to be to get players out of the portal to do what Calipari's talking about? Then you're looking at the high school ranks. What level of players are still out there? Most of the top 100 are spoken for already. There's a 2 or 3 more in your top 100 rankings that haven't committed. And then outside of the top 100, what could be out there? What kind of special situation could you bring a player in who may not have eligibility next year, but can practice and get work toward their academic progress, whatever. You've got the whole summer. You don't have to have everybody on campus now, even though summer session 1 has started. Summer session 2 follows immediately after that. But we've seen programs, including Arkansas, add players really late. Could there be some players overseas that Calipari goes and finds and pulls somebody from over there, and gets them in his program? Sorry, Kevin. The trolls are getting on your nerves. Yeah, get all kinds of folks that jump in here and say stuff. It's great, whatever. I do my thing. I don't get to the comments on regularly anyway. I'm not very good with that, so I'm missing a lot of it, I guess. Go back and read them later. We'll see. But getting into this, and then we talk about a Will Riley. Will Riley just took a visit to Illinois, Kentucky, Alabama may be in there. He has expressed, even to me, that he wants to visit Arkansas. It can happen later in June. All right, so Will Riley's class of 2025. He's a 6'8" combo forward who can shoot the lights out. Very skilled offensive player. He can put the ball on the floor, create for others. 6'8", 6'9", very, very versatile guy. He's close. I would say he's really a 6'7", 6'8" range in terms of height and length. I got to see him play in person weekend before last. But look, he's heavily considering reclassifying to 2024. Would he be a guy that Calipari shifts his thinking a little bit and says, all right, we'll get some NIL money for him. Now we're 10 deep with a potential rotation, and let's see if we can use this guy to give the perimeter some more firepower shooting the ball. That's one thing. If I'm looking at 9 deep and I'm really pinpointing what I think Arkansas could still use, it's a perimeter shooter. It's 3-point shooting. And maybe a guy with a little bit of a length on that perimeter who can shoot over a contested closeout because of his size and length. And Will Riley checks that box. And so kind of peeling it back a little bit, what could Arkansas still do? What could Calipari still do? I don't think he was fibbing when he said he's going to keep it at 9. But things are always fluid, and he could change his mind on that and add maybe a 10th piece. That would be getting some NIL money, and maybe he finds a way to factor him into a potential to be in his two deep rotation or have an option there. Because I don't know how much of the drop off you really get if you're strictly now sticking to adding 2 or 3 more, where you're figuring it out with Pell Grant money, camp money, and some other ways to put them on old school scholarships, and they're not expecting to have any kind of a role right away. And now you got some path to earn NIL money later. Again, these are just things I'm speculating on, but a Will Riley to me would be a great addition at this point. And then again, let's see if he ever makes it to campus. Let's see, but wow, we got some. We do have a few live ones jumping in here. So again, backfilling it, we had so many names to talk about in those top 9. We kind of knew where it was going once we knew that players were going to come, had been singled out to come visit. The process really was, once you were getting them on campus, that was kind of the final move. Everything else had been laid out. Stuff I was learning from sources about the procedural stuff through the school were basically the table set. You're doing the formality of getting them on campus. Yep, I like it here. I've already told you I'm in, but let's put it out now. That was kind of the process. Trevor Brazil's a little bit different. He was a portal player, now he's not. He's not even the portal rankings anymore. Why? Because he's no longer a portal player. If you're a Razorback going into the portal and you're a Razorback coming out of it, you weren't a transfer. And then you look at what Calipari did. I mean, I love the way that he chopped this up. A guy that so much of his career was just loading up on one and done's high school players. You got 3 5-stars out of the high school ranks. Guys you didn't just grab at the end here. Guys you'd already recruited. They were already committed to you for a while. You changed schools, they came with you. You got 3 guys to follow you from Kentucky. Guys that factored into your rotation. Guys that were part of your success last year. We can talk about one and done in the NCAA tournament and losing to Oakland, but that was a top 10, top 15 ranked Kentucky team most all season. Finished second, one game out of winning a championship in what we just said was a really good SEC. And so you brought valuable pieces with you from Kentucky. You went and got arguably 2 of the top 10 players, and Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu, out of the portal, true portal guys that have a lot of experience, a lot of deep run NCAA tournament experience. And then Brazil, who's got Arkansas experience, and let's not pretend like this guy's just an afterthought just because he was 9th on the board. He was 9th off the board because there was a coaching change at Arkansas. He put his name in the portal in case the NBA didn't work out. He was invited to the combine. The combine doesn't just invite guys willy-nilly. They invite the top players that are projected for your 58 to 60 picks. I think they're still 58 this year. Last year it was that way. A couple of teams were penalized and lost their picks. But the point is, these guys that are invited aren't invited just because they have a name. They're invited because they're the most likely to get drafted. But not all of them will, and they have their reasons. And NIL now plays a big part in being a carrot to dangle and say, look, you can get paid here now. You can get paid well here, better than what you might do if you price a 2-way deal. So again, some of this stuff we repeat, but it's worth repeating because I love what Calipari's done with this roster. I think he has. We could even call it roster checks and balances. High school talent, check. But you can't live on that alone. Getting quality players out of the portal, having program continuity and retention. The idea that Arkansas was starting from scratch is kind of blown out of the water. You've got you got 4 players, 3 from Kentucky that play with Cal, 1 that's been at Arkansas and will be going in his 3rd season. You've got some continuity and flow of things just from those guys. And then guys you're going to trust in Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu out of the portal because they weren't just veteran players. They weren't just individual performers, but both had big parts in getting teams down to the Elite 8 and Final 4 the last 2 years. And so you're trying to get back and figure out combinations that'll help you have postseason success, not just regular season success. You've also got a lot of guys that have potential first-round draft picks or draft picks in the next draft in 2025. I mean, there are projections for Big Z. There are projections for Adu Thero. We don't know with Nelly Davis or Jonas Adu. They weren't projected as top guys, but who knows if they can help themselves. Trevor Brazile very likely could end up being, could do, things go right, could be a first round pick. The NBA, he's almost never wrong. Not only said that it was the right decision for Brazile to return to college, but he said Arkansas was the best place for him. Said this before anything started to kind of develop immediately. Well, we'll see. We'll see if that's what if it is. You know, he could be wrong. He could strike out for once with me. We'll see. But you know what? When I just going through it, you got when I look at this freshman class, they're 5 stars. All of those guys should not only be, in my opinion, you go into it saying they're not only potential for all SEC freshman teams, but potential to be all league guys, depending upon what kind of roles they hammer out and are able to give you and prove they're worthy of. Calipari just last year had multiple backcourt freshmen that not only thrive, but they're going to be taken not only in the first round, but some of them top 5, top 10, top 15, some of them lottery picks. So he's got a proven track record. It wasn't the first time that's happened for him. It's one of many. So again, you look up and down this roster, it's rich with talent. It's got positional versatility. You've got length and size and depth now in your front court. I think enough depth in terms of a top 9. You've got enough depth and versatility with your backcourts and wings, 5 to 6 players there. Based on how you shift things, you can play small ball. You can go really big jumbo lineup. You can play traditional lineups. You've got versatility throughout. I don't see a lot of guys that I wouldn't consider versatile because you've got some guys, even if you say, well, Adu Thero, 6'8", he can play the 3-4. There's versatility there. He brings a lot of defensive versatility. Some guys, maybe it's more on offense. That's another thing Calipari needs to solve. His team was great offensively last year, not so much defensively. Typically, his best teams are really strong on the glass, including the offensive glass, and in transition. When I look at this group, I see the potential for all of that. So what kind of player does he get? We went back to this to backfill the roster. We were starting talking about what would be the high school options. I mentioned one name that's still in the portal technically. It seemed, I mean, maybe he gets someone out of the portal. Maybe it's a Will Riley situation. Who knows? Or something we haven't, something overseas. But if I were talking about what does Arkansas still need, let's just say he only adds 2 more guys. If you're getting 2 more guys, I say get another front court player if you can, and potentially a wing with some size if you can, but certainly someone that can shoot, someone that you can identify as, hey, this guy might be able to help us as a shooter. I want to tell you a name right now for this back end stuff. Had he hung around, he was the first one in the portal day one after Arkansas season ended, is Joseph Pinion. I talked to somebody who brought that up, and I thought it was interesting. He thought that might be where, that a year under, staying another year at Arkansas and playing for Cal and potentially have a role as just a guy that could come in and shoot and give you a little length on the perimeter when doing it would be interesting. Joseph Pinion wants to play. That didn't happen. So to agree to maybe not being inside even the top 2 rotation with a chance with spot duty to help there probably wouldn't be enough of a of a motivator to stick around. And we know how it played out. He was in the portal, first one in, and Arkansas State really wanted him. So I'm not trying to poo-poo that. That'll be a situation where he's going to be a priority player on that team. And so I'd be interested to see Joseph Pinion's development. But it was an interesting thought in terms of, well, yeah, if he stuck around and waiting for his turn, it makes sense why that wouldn't be something necessarily that Joseph Pinion would want to do. But it was just intriguing. But it may be something like that. Do you lure somebody that's in the portal and not even ranked or somewhere that's in there to Arkansas and say, look, we come here, play a year for Cal, go up against the best, some of the best players in the country that we brought in, and then we'll develop you and see what happens next year. I mean, Cal's talked about he doesn't want to develop guys just to release them back into the portal the next year because they didn't have the role they wanted. So maybe he's got a plan with the way he's doing it now to say, look, you're going to get NIL money, you'll have more of a role to stick around, but this is your role now. I mean, we just don't know until we see that. A lot of speculation here. All right, 45 minutes in, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. It's our Thursday morning. Maybe some stuff will break. Anything that comes out that we need to talk about, we're going to back in and do another live. If not, it may be the weekend before we do it. Again, if you haven't already done it, please hit subscribe, like, share the content. We appreciate it. It helps us. And again, this is just kind of a follow up. We kind of touched on what happened with Arkansas and Coleman Hawkins and the Trevor Brazile situation. I felt like Brazile was a great, savvy move for more than one reason. I think it benefits both Brazile and Calipari. I love Arkansas's roster now. I think it should be top 3-ish SEC when we start talking preseason, top 10-ish when you look around the country. Some of the scheduling stuff we talked about, I hope you got something from that. Can't wait to hear the next scheduling information. And I'd like to start hearing some of the staff stuff become maybe more formalized and announced officially. But until next time, when we have something else to talk about, I will see you then.